I stood quietly in my aunt's living room, still holding the carefully wrapped wedding present I had spent weeks choosing. My fingers gripped the ribbon as if it might steady me. My heart was light, full of anticipation. "I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow," I said, smiling brightly. But Aunt Margaret didn't smile back. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the corners of her mouth trembling as though she were fighting words she couldn't speak. "But I saw it," she whispered. Her eyes flickered with something caught between sorrow and guilt. She drew in a slow, deliberate breath before asking, "Clara, would you like a cup of coffee?" "Sure," I answered, trying to shake off the uneasy silence that had suddenly filled the room. While she walked toward the kitchen, the stillness pressed down on me. I let my gaze wander, and that's when I noticed a photo album lying open on the coffee table. Its glossy pages caught the light. Curiosity tugged at me. I leaned down, flipped a page, and my world tilted. There, frozen in vivid color, were photographs of my family. My brother Daniel, his bride Sophia, my parents, uncles and aunts, even cousins I hadn't seen in years, all of them smiling beneath strings of fairy lights, in a lush garden filled with blooms and lanterns, the kind of setting people dream about for a perfect wedding. Aunt Margaret returned with 2 steaming mugs. She paused when she saw what I was staring at. "What is this?" I asked, my voice tightening. "Is this from some kind of rehearsal?" She set the tray down with trembling hands and sat beside me. "The wedding," she said softly. "It was last weekend." My breath caught. "But the invitation said tomorrow," I whispered. "I know," she replied, tears gathering in her eyes. "They gave you the wrong date." Deliberately. The room fell into a silence so heavy it seemed to choke the air. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I told Daniel it was cruel. I told your parents. I almost refused to go." I closed the album, my hands shaking. I could barely hear my own thoughts above the pounding in my chest. They hadn't overlooked me. They hadn't simply forgotten. They had excluded me, intentionally. And just like that, the gift I had chosen with such care, the gown I had bought, the fragile hope I had nurtured for weeks, shattered in a single breath. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was betrayal. My name is Clara Benson, and for as long as I can remember, I have been invisible to the very people who were meant to love me first. Growing up in a quiet suburb outside of Milwaukee, I was the forgotten middle child, not the golden boy like Daniel, not the baby of the family like Lily, just Clara, silent, dependable, the extra pair of hands no one asked for but always expected. My childhood memories are painted with the same patterns. Family dinners where I laid out the plates, poured the water, cleared the dishes. Yet rarely did anyone ask how school was, or what I had drawn in art class, or how I was doing at all. Christmas mornings were no different. Everyone would unwrap matching sweaters, red and green, carefully chosen, while mine would be a mismatched color, sometimes 2 sizes off. Once my box was missing altogether, and while my siblings compared gifts, I smiled and pretended not to notice. Birthdays were the hardest. When I turned 16, I sat by the window waiting for someone to call me down to dinner. I waited all night, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, watching the porch light flicker outside. No dinner ever came. The next morning, my mother sent a short text. "Happy belated birthday. Hope you're doing well." Back then, I convinced myself it wasn't personal. I told myself they were busy, distracted, overwhelmed with Daniel's sports, with Lily's endless activities. I clung to the idea that maybe, deep down, they meant well. I held on to that fragile hope for far too long. At 19, I finally moved out. I told myself independence would heal the emptiness. I began in graphic design, but soon transitioned into digital marketing. I found my footing working with small businesses and local real estate firms. Over time, I built not just stability, but success. I made careful investments, founded a property management company, and quietly became the silent force behind several ventures in town. But to my family, I was still messing around with computers. They never asked what I actually did, never cared to know. They assumed, and I let them, because part of me thought, If I just stayed useful, if I kept smiling, kept showing up, they might finally notice me. I thought maybe one Thanksgiving I'd be invited home without being an afterthought. Maybe one day my mother would call me simply to hear my voice. Maybe Daniel would introduce me proudly as his sister, instead of dodging around my existence. But that day never came. Only Aunt Margaret ever saw me. She called on weekends, her warm voice filling the silence of my apartment. She never forgot my birthday. She asked about my projects, listened with genuine interest, and told me she was proud of the way I stood on my own. She was the only one who ever dared to ask, "Don't you get lonely?" I always laughed, brushed it aside. No, not really. But the truth was yes. Yes, I did. Especially when the people who should have loved me most acted like I wasn't there at all. The invitation arrived on an ordinary Thursday. I was sorting through a pile of mail, mostly credit card offers, catalogs, and flyers, when my eyes landed on a thick envelope edged in shimmering gold. My heart gave a startled skip. It was addressed to me in careful handwriting I didn't recognize. Hands trembling, I slid my finger under the seal. Inside, on heavy cardstock, were the words I never thought I'd see. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Daniel Benson and Sophia Monroe." The ceremony was listed for June 24th, with a black tie reception to follow at the Lakeside Orchid Estate, RSVP requested. For several seconds, I simply stood frozen in my hallway, the invitation clutched in my hand. I reread it once, twice, a third time. It still bore my name, my address. There was no mistake. After years of being overlooked, of being treated as the shadow at the edge of the family portrait, my brother had invited me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself believe I had been seen. Tears welled up, not out of sorrow, but from a strange, fragile joy. A light cracked through the door I thought had been sealed shut. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into preparations. I picked out a navy gown, soft in texture, its sleeves embroidered with delicate patterns that caught the light. I ordered a custom crystal decanter set, etched in gold with Daniel and Sophia's initials. I booked appointments to have my hair styled, my nails carefully polished, my makeup planned. Every small choice mattered, because I believed this invitation was more than a formality. It was an olive branch, a sign that perhaps at last I was no longer an outsider, that someone in my family had looked at the guest list and thought, "Yes, Clara belongs here." That thought kept me warm at night. I imagined the laughter, the music, the flicker of candlelight at the reception. I pictured Daniel seeing me and smiling proudly, introducing me as his sister. I pictured my parents clasping my hand, relieved to have me there. For a little while, that fragile dream carried me. I held it like a lantern in the dark, until the moment I discovered it had all been a lie. Aunt Margaret's hands trembled as she set the coffee tray down on the table. The steam curled from the mugs, vanishing into the still air. I sat motionless, staring at the wedding album, hoping the images might rearrange themselves if I blinked long enough. My throat was dry, yet I forced the words out. "You said the wedding was last weekend?" She nodded, her eyes glossy with tears. "I tried to tell you, Clara, truly I did, but I couldn't find the words. I was ashamed." I looked down again. Page after page showed them. Daniel in a tailored navy tuxedo, Sophia glowing in a lace gown beneath fairy lights, our parents beaming at their side. There were champagne toasts, group portraits, laughter caught mid-dance, and not a single hint that anyone noticed I was missing. But I received the invitation, I whispered. It said tomorrow. Aunt Margaret exhaled shakily, her voice almost breaking. "Your mother and Daniel planned it that way. They didn't want you there, but they also didn't want to face the confrontation, so they gave you a false date, thinking by the time you realized it would be too late." My pulse thundered in my ears. I felt like a fool. I had spent weeks preparing, choosing a gift with care, picturing where I might sit, rehearsing conversations in my mind. I had imagined what it might feel like to belong again, but it had never been real. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. Why go to such lengths? What did I do wrong? Aunt Margaret squeezed my hand. It's not you, sweetheart. It's them. They've always treated you like some inconvenient echo, and I hate myself for not doing more to stop it. I stood up, my whole body shaking. I need to hear it from them, directly. She tried to stop me. Clara, don't go alone. This kind of cruelty, it leaves bruises no one can see. I have to, I said firmly. I need to stop wondering. I need to hear them admit it. She nodded reluctantly, her voice low. Then promise me this. Whatever happens, remember, you are strong. You have always been strong, and you will always have me. I hugged her tightly, tears sliding down my cheeks. Then, without another word, I left. The drive to my parents' house blurred past. Rows of familiar houses, the faint glow of porch lights, the scent of rain clinging to the summer air. When I stepped inside, their laughter died instantly. My parents were seated in the living room with Daniel and Sophia, flipping through photographs as if replaying the celebration. The faint scent of lemon cake and coffee lingered. The moment they saw me, the warmth evaporated. Clara? My mother blinked. What are you doing here? I didn't answer her. My eyes locked on Daniel. The wedding was last weekend. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. Yes, my mother said finally, avoiding my gaze. It was a small ceremony. Small. Yet the album in Aunt Margaret's house showed more than 50 guests. I got an invitation, I said, my voice strained. For a different date. Daniel exhaled sharply. Because we never intended for you to come. The words landed like ice water. We didn't want you ruining it, he continued coldly. You're always quiet, always watching. It unsettles people. I just wanted one perfect day, and that meant without you. I turned to my parents, desperate for contradiction. But my mother crossed her arms, her expression hard. You've always been difficult, Clara, like a shadow in the background, present but never part of anything. My father spoke quickly, trying to soften the blow. We just didn't want tension. We thought it would be simpler this way. By pretending I don't exist? I asked, my voice breaking. You're disrupting the peace we've worked so hard to build, my mother replied flatly. Disrupting the peace. By wanting to belong, I whispered. Daniel stood abruptly. This conversation is exactly why you weren't welcome. Take the hint, Clara. We don't want you. Time froze. I looked around at the people I once called family and saw only strangers. I see, I said quietly. And without another word, I turned and walked out the door. Outside, the evening air hit me like a slap. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I called Aunt Margaret. Thank you, I told her, my voice trembling. Thank you for being the only one who ever stood by me. Always, she whispered. Because family isn't about blood, it's about love. Her words stayed with me as I drove home. And that was the night something inside me finally broke. That was the night I decided I was done begging for scraps of love. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wedding invitation still pinned to the fridge. The gold lettering, once so full of promise, now looked like a cruel joke. I removed it carefully, folded it once, and slipped it into a drawer. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't seeking revenge, that's never been who I am. What I wanted was distance, closure, freedom from this endless cycle of rejection. And the truth was, I had the means to make that happen. No one in my family had ever asked how I paid my bills. They assumed I scraped by, doing something with websites. They never knew that for 6 years I had built a solid income in digital marketing, specializing in client acquisition for real estate firms. They never knew about the long nights, the contracts, the small victories that turned into stability. Eventually, I reinvested my earnings into property, quietly, strategically. Today I owned 3 residential buildings in Illinois, along with a portion of a commercial space downtown. And the family home, the cottage by the lake, the one everyone thought belonged to my parents, was, in fact, legally mine. Years earlier, when they had fallen behind on payments, I had purchased my mother's share through my LLC, protecting it from foreclosure. I had even allowed them to live there rent-free, covering property taxes and repairs through anonymous contributions issued by my company. I thought I was helping. I thought maybe one day they would appreciate it. But they never did. So now, I was finished. I picked up the phone and called my attorney, Linda Chen. My voice was steady, though my hands shook. They've been emotionally abusive for years, I told her. They don't even realize I've been the one supporting them all this time. Linda was calm, efficient. Then we'll begin with a restraining order, and we'll shut down all financial contributions. Clara, you don't owe them anything. The next few days blurred into paperwork and evidence. I gathered photographs, saved chat records, and most importantly, the wedding invitation that proved their deliberate deceit. Emails were sent, documents notarized, affidavits prepared. A month later, the court granted a temporary restraining order. I froze the account that funded the home's upkeep. I instructed my property manager to halt all maintenance support. And then I waited. The first phone call came from my mother. Clara, what is this? What have you done? We're your family. Not anymore, I said quietly. And this time, I meant it. The cottage by the lake had been in the family for decades. It once belonged to my grandparents, who had passed it down to my mother and her siblings. Eventually, my parents claimed it as their own. At least that's what everyone believed. What no one knew was that when my parents couldn't keep up with the mortgage, I stepped in. Quietly, legally. Through my company, I purchased the property. From that moment, it was mine. They never wondered how the roof got fixed or why the tax bills vanished. They simply assumed miracles happened. But the miracle was me. And now, the miracle was over. One morning, Linda called me. Her tone was firm. The title is clean. Your LLC holds full ownership. You can proceed with eviction if you're ready. My answer was simple. Do it. A formal notice was prepared, 30 days to vacate and surrender the keys. For delivery, I asked a second attorney, Marcus Lee, to accompany Linda, along with the county sheriff, just in case. We pulled into the gravel driveway on a gray Monday morning. The cottage stood silent, wrapped in pine trees and memories. My father opened the door. He looked older than I remembered, worn and tired. His voice cracked as he spoke. Clara, won't you come inside? No, I said evenly. Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, handing him the envelope. Mr. Benson, this is a legal notice of eviction. You have 30 days to vacate the premises and return the keys. My father's eyes scanned the paper in disbelief. But this is our home. It was, I replied, my voice steady. Now, it's mine. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale as she read the truth on my expression. You're throwing us out? After everything we've done for you? I met her gaze, unwavering. After everything I did for you, with no thanks, no recognition, and now this? Yes, I am, her voice cracked. We have nowhere to go. You can stay with Daniel, I said coldly. He made it clear I wasn't family. Now I'm making it clear I don't belong to this one either. My father's eyes glistened. He stepped forward, his voice breaking. Please don't do this. We're sorry, I shook my head. You had years. You chose silence. You chose exclusion. And now I choose myself. They had 30 days. On the 31st, the locks were changed. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. 3 months passed. The cottage had been sold. Part of the money I reinvested into a new property venture, and part I quietly donated to a nonprofit supporting young women estranged from their families. I believed that chapter of my life was finished. Until one autumn morning, the receptionist at my office buzzed my line. Ms. Benson, there's a couple here. They say their last name is Benson. They're asking to see you. My heart sank. Technically, They weren't violating the restraining order, as long as they stayed in the lobby. "I'll be down in 5 minutes," I told her, though my body resisted moving. The elevator ride was heavy, each ding echoing louder than it should have. When the doors finally opened, I saw them, my parents. They looked diminished. My father's shoulders slumped under the weight of years and regrets. His shirt hung loose, his shoes worn thin. My mother looked older, smaller, her wedding ring gone, her eyes dulled by exhaustion. "Clara," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Please. Can we talk?" I stepped back instinctively. The restraining order is still in place. "We know," my father said quickly. "But we had no other choice." My mother clasped her hands together, desperate. "We've lost everything. After the eviction, we tried to rent, but the rent was too high. The car broke down. We've been living in a motel, barely getting by." I stayed silent. "We went to Daniel," my father added, his voice low. "But things are strained. He couldn't help us. Or maybe he wouldn't." Tears glistened in my mother's eyes. "You've always been capable, always caring. Even when we didn't ask, you still helped us. Can't you help us now?" I shook my head slowly. "No. I helped you because I thought I had to earn love. Because I believed if I gave enough, you'd finally see me." "Clara," she whispered, "can't we put the past behind us?" I glanced through the lobby's glass doors. Outside, autumn leaves spiraled in the wind, the world moving forward whether they did or not. "It's not about the past," I said quietly. "It's about who I am now, and who you chose never to know." I turned, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of them. Small, fragile, and broken. The power they once had over me was gone. And just like that, I left them behind. It has been more than a year now. I bought a modest house by the lake. Nothing lavish, just a home with wide windows and morning light that spills across the floor. Each day, I rise early, make my coffee, and watch the sunrise ripple over the water. For the first time in my life, I no longer wait for anyone's approval. I still talk to Aunt Margaret every Sunday. She is the one who never let me fade into the background. We talk about little things, books, new recipes, the weather, and yet, with her, I've never felt invisible. For years, I begged for a seat at their table. I thought if I gave enough, my time, my money, my very self, they might finally welcome me. But now I've built my own table, one where I belong, one where I choose who sits beside me. The peace I've found isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't need an audience. It's quiet, steady, real, and for the first time, it's enough. So if you've ever been made to feel unseen, if the very people who should have loved you left you feeling like an afterthought, hear me clearly. You are not the problem. You are not alone. And you deserve a life that truly feels like your own. If this story touched you, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, your story matters.